Welcome everyone to today's session on promoting diversity and inclusion through non-traditional career paths in technology. My name is Esther Mendez, and by way of background, I lead worldwide partner business development efforts at Amazon Web Services for the banking and payments industries. I have 30 years of strategy, business development, product, and marketing experience involving financial services and technology firms. During today's discussion, we will focus on the path to a successful career in technology and how it does not always have to start with a bachelor's degree in computer science. The executive panel with me will share their alternate career paths that are not only promoting inclusion and diversity in technology, but also support socioeconomic equity. I am delighted to be joined by Julie Elberfeld and Christine Stoffel-Moffitt, who are both passionate about inclusion and diversity in technology. Let me tell you a little bit about our panelists. Julie has spent over 3 decades in technology. She was previously with Capital One as a senior tech executive, including 7 years as a commercial bank CIO. She is passionate about inclusion and diversity and founded Women in Tech and many other programs to drive diversity and inclusion in the workplace. She is currently a senior advisor for a nonprofit Opportunity at Work and an ID&E strategy consultant to executives. Christine has built a 30-year technology leadership career and is known across the global sports and entertainment industry as a digital transformation executive. Christine is recognized as the first female technology executive hired in a National Hockey League club and the first female technology executive hired in a Major League Baseball club. She was recently honored as one of the top 100 women in global technology innovation by Digital Technology magazine. She is currently the head of enterprise technology and InfoSec at NASCAR and the founder and CEO of Sports and Entertainment Alliance in Technology, a global consortium of thousands of sports and entertainment leaders. Well, ladies, let's get started. The first question is for Julie. Julie, can you tell us about your journey as an IT executive and how that led to your current focus on diversity and inclusion in the tech industry?
Sure, Esther, thank you. First of all, I'm just so thrilled to be here with you and Christine on this very important topic. And, my story is very related to the talk that we're having today because I never really expected to be in a career in technology. I was a math major in college and I was going to graduate school to be a professor, and I decided that really wasn't for me. And I was really fortunate that there was a bank in Cincinnati, Fifth Third Bank, who offered me the opportunity to teach me to become a software engineer. They just believed in my skills and knew that they could teach me what I needed to know to be able to code. And the rest is history, so to speak. I loved the field. I never looked back. And I just continued to learn more and take on more responsibility. I moved into management roles and ultimately became the divisional CIO for commercial banking there at Fifth Third. And then in 2010, Capital One called me up with an offer that had turned out to be the best thing I ever did in my whole career. And I ended up spending 10 years at Capital One. As you mentioned, I was the divisional CIO there for their commercial bank for 7 years in the 10 years that I was there. And it was just such an amazing time going through the digital transformation with Capital One and their conversion to cloud. I learned so much and really loved my experience. But in 2014, something happened that just transformed my career and really, honestly, my whole life. And two young ladies introduced me to some of the challenges that women were starting to face in the tech industry and shared a lot of numbers with me. And I was frustrated because I had joined the tech industry at a time when women were not terribly underrepresented. And so I just hadn't really realized what had happened over the 3 decades that I had been in technology. And I was frustrated, and I turned that frustration into motivation and inspiration And I started our Women in Tech program there and a number of other initiatives, and ultimately realized this was my passion. This is what I was destined to do. And so in 2017, I gave up my divisional CIO job and ended up spending 50% of my time being the executive sponsor of diversity and inclusion for Capital One's tech organization. And it just was so clear that this was my passion that last summer I left there to pursue this full time. So that's my journey and how I ended up both in technology and now as a DEI executive advisor.
That's great. Thank you, Julie. Christine, can you tell us about your path to an IT leadership role, specifically in the sports and entertainment industry?
Absolutely. And I love hearing Julie's story because it resonates with me so much. You know, when I was in college, I started in IT because when I was in college, I was actually majoring in accounting and finance. And as much as I loved it, I had a computer and it kept breaking. And I was the typical broke college kid, and it kept breaking. And I kept having to pay someone to fix my computer. And I finally got to a point to where I said, you know, I'm just going to tear it apart and see if I can figure it out myself. So I read the manual, tore apart my computer, and it was an old 286. If you know computers and you have a history in computers, you know that that's a very old computer. And I rebuilt it from the ground up. I fixed the memory issue and I fixed the hard drive issue. And at that point, and then I turned it back on and it worked. And I knew at that point that I was going to change my career path. And I knew also at that point, no one would ever fix my computer for me again, that I could do it myself. So I continued to build a career in technology, got certifications, and moved forward, eventually working in the medical industry, and had a 12-year career in a Fortune 100 medical industry. And in that company, I continued to move forward, take on more, getting out of my comfort zone, taking on Exchange servers and Windows servers and web servers, and then moving into all these different verticals within the organization and, you know, and the path of technology. And then after was quite some time, I received an opportunity to enter the sports entertainment industry as the CTO and vice president of the Phoenix Coyotes. When I entered the sports world, that was my first entry in the sports world in 2006. I quickly learned that being in technology and the sports entertainment industry, kind of a double-edged sword. There were no women that were really, you know, in the sports entertainment industry in technology, which is why I ended up being the first, and I didn't realize it, but I was the first IT executive in the NHL club. And then very soon I was recruited by the Diamondbacks, by the Arizona Diamondbacks, to become their vice president of technology. And then I was the first female executive, IT executive in all of Major League Baseball. And but the really interesting thing is very similar to Julie, is I watched the sports entertainment industry, and I also became a little frustrated seeing that there were not many women that were even interested in the sports and entertainment industry in technology. And I knew I needed to make a change in that, and I needed to get people interested in this and get women interested in this. And that there's so many great, smart women out there that they could make a difference. So I started SEAT in 2006. And SEAT is a global sports consortium, you know, and continued to build that and build momentum of how people looked at technology within the sports entertainment industry. And that's really was my true entry into the sports entertainment industry, and, you know, kind of catapulted a career moving forward from there.
I love hearing about both of your backgrounds and how different your journeys have been. It's great to see you really breaking glass there, both of you, and leading to successful executive roles in IT and changing and creating an environment for change that promotes inclusion. So Julie, Why is this topic of promoting diversity and inclusion so important today?
So let me just dial back a little bit and say, like, we are in the midst of a digital revolution. Technology is shaping everything about our experiences, our economy, our job market, and it's just continuing to escalate. And so, this demand for digital capabilities is creating a tremendous job market in technology. There were 400,000 open jobs in April of this year, and there were 1 million open tech jobs in the first half of 2019. And yet, universities are only graduating about 75,000 computer science graduates a year. The math just doesn't work. And as often happens when there is a supply demand mismatch, the salaries in technology are continuing to escalate, and even tremendously this year. And so you have this situation where you have some of the best paying jobs, some of the most future proof jobs, and huge demand. Yet we have this industry that is very homogenous. You know, women make up only 18–19% of computer science graduates. They're only 25% of the industry overall. Women of color make up less than 10% of tech workers. And African American and Hispanic people are represented in tech at half the rate they are in the private sector workforce. And contributing to this representation problem is the dropout rate. Women and people of color are dropping out of technology even after they choose this as a career at over double the rate of white men. And so you have this just really unfortunate situation happening where you have this just really homogenous workforce. And nothing against any of the great men that I've worked with in my career in the tech industry. But the reality is that when the tech industry doesn't represent all of us, when we have such a homogenous group of people around the table creating solutions, we're not creating equality in the solutions for everyone. You know, research shows that homogenous teams are not as innovative, they're not as creative, they're not as good at problem solving. They make more mistakes. I don't think that we really want that in the tech industry that's shaping our future, right? We're already seeing it happening with things like facial recognition software. But really, for me, Esther, one of the most important reasons that I am so passionate about this topic is what you mentioned in the introduction. There's such a huge socioeconomic impact. When some of the highest paying jobs and some of the most future-proof jobs are held primarily by white and Asian men, we're just continuing the inequity and the opportunity gap that exists in the labor market. And that's really why I've dedicated the rest of my career to really trying to work on this problem.
It's great to hear your passion, Julie. Christine, your thoughts on the importance of the issues that Julie just outlined. You know, tech jobs are in extreme demand, and there's a pipeline problem of people, as she just points out. As an IT leader, how are you tackling the opportunity gap here to promote diversity?
It's such a great topic, and I am too passionate about this. You know, in the first when I started Seat in 2006, when for the first 8 years, there were 95% of the attendees of the conference were men. And so I started looking at this and going, okay, how do I change the programming of the conference and the group? And how do I change the mindsets to encourage more women to come into the conference and start that cross-pollination and that learning from each other? So that's when I introduced, and I started to do some research, and I found that a lot more women, instead of going into technology, they were actually going into marketing, CRM, analytics, those fields. So when I started changing the programming and introducing CRM, BI, digital marketing, those verticals and those topics into the Seat conference, that's when I started seeing more women come in and and attend the conference and start getting engaged. But what's really interesting is Seat has helped to transform the mindsets of people. And so I started even combining some of the sessions and combining digital marketing with technology and having individuals. I would have a CIO and a chief digital officer on the same panel, working together and collaborating together and sharing their experiences. And so when you start getting that mix and you start intertwining and helping people to understand that technology is not just core infrastructure technology. Technology is the backbone for how people can transcend into marketing, to CRM, to analytics. And so it was really interesting to start seeing more and more women become more interested in technology through a different channel, through the marketing, through those different avenues. And so, being an IT leader, even at NASCAR, I love to speak at colleges and universities. I love to share, the idea that even if they're looking at marketing as, as a path, that they need to also partner with technology individuals. And so they need to start talking amongst themselves and building those relationships. Men, women, they need to start talking because, like Julie said, there is so much cross pollination, so much learning. And when you get different perspectives and different mindsets, it starts really changing the conversation so much more and becoming more in depth. So that's where, I'm constantly encouraging women that are in a different field to consider how they look at technology and to consider maybe transforming their career and moving into a technology field. At NASCAR, about 30% of my staff in my IT organization are women. And it's wonderful when I get all my entire organization in a room and I throw out a topic and we start brainstorming. And the different ideas that come to the table are so amazing. And so they start seeing that they can leverage each other's mindsets and different perspectives. I just love it. My goal is always to encourage people to look at technology, to look at marketing, look at digital transformation in a different way, and to share and collaborate with each other and look for different perspectives. That's what's going to continue changing the culture and changing people and how they embrace each other and embrace each other's different viewpoints.
Julie, listening to all the points that Christine just made about the different disciplines coming together and realizing how technology brings everybody to a point in the discussion where they can share, can you tell me about alternate routes to a successful career in tech and how you see these successful plays emerging at large corporations?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Christine, you're doing amazing work, and the way that you think about this cross discipline is just really inspiring in the work that you're doing. Christine and I, and honestly, thousands of other people have come into the tech field through these non traditional, non computer science degreed routes. But unfortunately, I don't think that's happening as much today as it did in the past. And that's kind of the conundrum, right, in the heart of the conversation today. We talked about this huge scarcity problem that exists in technology with these 400,000 open jobs. Yet I would conjecture that it's somewhat self imposed. If you build a huge industry that's not proactively welcoming in people from diverse backgrounds, you're inevitably going to end up with a labor shortage and, quite honestly, suboptimal talent. And so, what we've seen happen over recent decades is that tech has started to filter on a very narrow profile of who they believe belongs, what college you went to, whether or not you were a computer science major, maybe where you worked or interned, even what clubs you belong to, right? And so, this filtering process, unfortunately, is having companies not see really great talent that's out there. There are millions of Americans that have the raw skills to do tech jobs. If we just gave them the encouragement and the training and the guarantee that jobs were there. So, what are alternate pathways? What do we mean by that? We mean people who are self taught, people who learned on the job, like I did, people who, have skills that are closely aligned to tech, but just need a little training to be able to make their way over into a tech career. People that went through boot camp programs. There are all kinds of nonprofits that are doing amazing work, like Year Up and Persepolis, community college programs, even high school programs now. And I would say that the time, Esther, is right for us to be looking at these alternatives because, look, the half life of tech skills now is less than 5 years. And so companies need to be looking for people who are learners and problem solvers and coming from different disciplines and creating the magic that Christine talked about. And so, if we already need to figure out how we're going to reskill and upskill people, isn't it the time to welcome in a broader profile of people into technology? So, I'm seeing that the best companies are realizing this, and they're seeing that these alternative pathways are a real source of talent rather than what we've done in the past, which is to invest in these opportunity youth programs, which is amazing, but then not really opening up the jobs at scale. Really good companies are creating apprenticeships and training programs. At Capital One, we created the Capital One Developer Academy that was for people who were not computer science majors. And it was amazing to get all those different perspectives and backgrounds. And the companies that are dropping the 4-year degree requirement and trusting their assessment process are really opening up a much more vast pool of potential workers. There are 70 million Americans that are skilled through alternative routes. And you know what? This gets back to this diversity conversation. By the way, all of these alternative routes offer up a way more diverse population than we're seeing in computer science majors. So, really, in my assessment, Esther, the only immediate solution to both the labor shortage problem and the diversity challenge is to really look at these alternative pathways to the 4-year computer science degree that has become the traditional route into technology.
Christine, how do you see that entry point into the technology career changing?
I am in complete agreement with Julie. I think there's, historically, the entry points come into call centers, service desk, those support functions. And, it's really interesting because last week I was actually on a call with an organization out of North Carolina. And these two women started a program, and it's a diversity program. And they go into the local communities and they start in the high schools. And I love that because if we can start getting, the younger folks interested in security and interested in technology, that's our future is high school, and then we mold them, and if they go into college, great, but if they don't, that's okay too, because the technical certifications are wide and varied. So one of the things that technology plays into, that it's part of the education and teaching people, at whatever age they are, that they can change their career path and they can move into technology. And technology is diverse. Technology is, it's security, it's analytics, it's business intelligence, it's, and I'm seeing and I'm encouraging people that are typically, maybe they deal with social media, maybe they deal with and creating sales funnels, and there are some data scientists that I have ended up transforming their careers and moving them into the technology because, again, that's the underlying. And if we can go into more communities, NASCAR has an amazing program in all the states that we have our racetracks. We are big in the community. We constantly are doing internships. This year we launched an entire summer internship program dedicated to diversity and inclusion, and it's across, outside of even technology. It's in HR, it's in accounting, it's in every single department across our organization. The cool thing is, whenever I bring in interns, and we have a big intern program here at NASCAR, we're always loving interns because we know that that is the future of our company. Whenever I bring in an intern, I usually start them at the service desk. And they start there because a couple things. They get to know, they get to talk to almost every person in the company. We have 2,300 employees in NASCAR. And so because they're front line in the technology, they learn about people, they learn the type of requests, they start learning different departments. And so as they continue through that internship, I start asking them, what do you like most? When you're talking to someone, when you're going and fixing someone's computer in the marketing department, does that interest you? So it's that continual education that technology is really the underlining of all of everything else that we do. ERP applications, cloud applications, and cloud solutions. Truly, that digital transformation, it knows no boundaries. It doesn't know that you can do anything and anyone can do anything. And so I think there's a preconceived notion about technology that it's difficult or it's complex. Well, it is. But if you start at the basics and you start kind of building, and you get the right mentors and some of the education and the technology and the technical training, truly anyone can enter this field at any age. There is no boundaries for this. Even at NASCAR, I have in my IT organization, I have moved people from being a CRM support analyst to a data engineer and architect. I've moved people from the service desk to the security team, from an internship to a network engineer, from a network architect into a security architect. I've helped people in my IT organization move into the marketing space because that they found out that was really their passion. And that's what we as IT leaders and we as leaders have to really embrace, is understanding what someone's passion is, what are their goals, and then help them to accomplish that. And it could be through technology, or we could get them from another way: marketing, BI, analytics, security. So there's just the door is so open, and and like Julie said, the job market is so wide open, and there's so much need for technologists to really come in and change and evolve the world, because that's really what's going to happen. Our future is high school, college, or older people that want to make that career change. We need to embrace all of it and be sure that we're helping them to transform their career paths and their life paths. That's what my passion is there, as you can probably tell.
I can. Well, with that, we will wrap up our session today. I want to thank you both, Julie and Christine, for your time and your insights today to discuss this very important topic. To the viewers, one request, please. Please answer the brief survey following the session. Have a great day, everyone.